Hello there Cajon players, thank you for coming by to check out another Cajon tutorial. Today we'll be looking at the Herta and diving into it a little bit more deeply. Thanks to a few people commenting on previous videos saying that using the Herta has really improved their fills. So today we're going to dive into that a bit deeper, as I said, and work on an exercise to really develop those skills. So today we'll be combining two really handy patterns, the Herta and the Paradiddle. If these are new for you haven't heard of them or haven't played them before, I'm going to link a couple of videos here so that you can check those out first and then use those ingredients to come back and get onto this exercise next. Alright, so in this video we're going to have two exercises to learn. One's fairly simple, the other is a little more complex. So let's start with the simple one first and I'll show you guys how to play it. So what we're doing in this first exercise is just taking that Herta pattern, that da 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 pattern, and then moving it around from the bass to the snare as bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, bass, snare, snare, bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, bass, snare, snare, which is just like a paradiddle. So you've got those two elements fused together. It makes a bit more of an exercise out of it because you're constantly thinking about those two things at once and getting better at moving the exercise with your hands up and down the cajon. So this exercise is really all about taking a very simple pattern and learning how to orchestrate it in more creative ways on the cajon. So thinking about whether that fill should start at the bass, move its way up to the snare, or start at the snare, go down to bass for a couple of times, come back up to snare, start to create a little more of a musical type of cajon fill. So I'm going to speed up that exercise now, just so you can hear how it sounds at a higher tempo. And then following that, we're going to look at our second, more complex Herta Paradiddle exercise. Now let's look at our second exercise for this video. The challenge being that we're going to now split up that Herta. So we're going to split it up so that we've got bass, bass, snare, snare, bass, bass, snare, snare, or snare, snare, bass, bass, snare, snare, bass, bass. So this is actually one of my favourite things to play on the cajon, mainly because with very little effort, it sounds like you're playing everything that the cajon has at once. You're really quickly going from bass to snare, snare to bass, and really the effort that goes in with your hands with the Herta is very efficient, I would say, which makes it easy to bring it up to a higher speed and really impress some people if they're listening to you play. Now to get practicing that, I would say start off with just bass, bass, snare, snare, bass, bass, snare, snare. Practice that variation for some time on its own, and then following that, try the inverse. So snare, snare, bass, bass, snare, snare, bass, bass. I'll show you what I mean. I personally find that my weaker version of the two is the snare, snare, bass, bass variation. I'm not sure why, but you might have the same situation where there's one variation that you need to practice a little bit more than the other so that you can bring them up to the same kind of skill level each. Okay, so now we have to bring in that second element, which is the paradiddle. Again, we're going to fuse those two things together, the Herta and the paradiddle. So to do that in this case, think of it as start with the bass, start with the snare, start with the bass, start with the bass, start with the snare, start with the bass, start with the snare, start with the snare. I'll show you what I mean. So there's my example of what feels like being everywhere on the cajon at once. The other thing I noticed is, I don't know if you did as well, but my weaker variation, the starting with the snare variation, starts to limit my growth up at the higher tempos. So what I might do is just practice that variation on its own so that I can come back to the paradiddle model and then start to bring it up together again. So I've got a bit to work on as well. And that's going to bring us to the end of this cajon tutorial for today. And I would say if there's one overall lesson from this, I would say that that would be, take something that you've learned, get to that point where you're fairly comfortable playing it, and then bring in some other element. Let's say that paradiddle today. That other element comes in and pushes you back outside of that comfort zone. So what something like that does is it forces you to learn something and then learn it again so that it might be more variable. So again, paradiddle's great because you can go bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, bass. Basically, it always gives you that extra thought when it comes to orchestration of an idea. Anyway, thank you so much for coming by to check out another cajon tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please leave it a like or give me a comment, let me know what you thought. And of course, if you want to see more of these videos in the future, feel free to subscribe as well. And until next time, happy cajon playing. We'll see you later.